This AgVision program is made possible through the generous support of Syngenta Seeds, NK brand. The results you need, the freedom to choose. And by Farms.com. Ag news, market prices, ag careers, and farm real estate. You'll find it all at Farms.com. In the spring of 2009, a farm organization known as President's Council launched a campaign to raise awareness of the impact that farmers have on the Ontario economy. It was a pilot project based in Ontario, but the initiative is being continued and built to include other farm and food chain partners ultimately across Canada. Ipsos Forward Research conducted the measurement of this campaign, and David Webb is the Associate Vice President of Ipsos Forward Research, and he joins us here in studio. Glad to have you here.
Good to be here, Kevin.
You measured a number of things in this, awareness upwards of 36% for this campaign, but you also mentioned a few other things, consumer perceptions of agriculture and such, and so I want to talk a bit about that. Before we do, give me an idea of who you measured and how many you measured, first of all.
We went out and we talked to 1,200 Ontario consumers. These were all aged 25 plus, and they held the primary grocery shopping responsibilities for their household. Okay. The survey was demographically representative of Ontario, so it had a good mix of ages, gender, income, and education level.
Nice. Now, from the data that you measured, again, keeping in mind for the viewers watching that this is an Ontario pilot,
that's right.
But I think the data would be relevant across the country. Are we seeing any significant changes in where consumers buy food?
Not really. Quite frankly, over the past few years, grocery shopping behavior has continued to be directed at the large chain and discount grocery stores. About 80% of consumers are shopping there on a monthly basis, and that's then followed by the mass merchandisers like Zellers and Walmart.
Right. Now, I remember over the last number of years you've heard a lot, especially a lot of small rural communities in Canada, concerned about the big box, the club stores, the big warehouse stores. Yes. Have they had a significant impact on grocery, the percentage of grocery purchases?
Absolutely. A year ago when we did this study, 25% of consumers indicated they were shopping at some form of a club store. And in this wave of research, it had increased up to 30%. So there is, that would be the one change that we've seen over the past years, an increase in those club store purchases.
Right. Now, we hear a great deal in the media about the popularity of farmers markets, about buying local. And it's always a little bit difficult, certainly from a media perspective, to know what is information that we are hyping as media and what is actually occurring out there. So from your perspective, are a significant number of consumers out there actually making the effort to purchase locally or direct from a farmer?
Absolutely. This study found that 15% of Ontario grocery shoppers were going to a farmer's market at least once a month. An additional 5% were buying straight from the farm gate on a monthly basis. So no, it's certainly not of the magnitude of the main retail outlets, but that's still a pretty significant chunk of consumers who are shopping at a farmer's market or directly from the farm on a monthly basis.
And in general terms, because you've measured this type of stuff before, is that a trend that is moving in any particular direction? Is it growing? Is it stagnant? How do you...
Overall, I would say that it's quite a stable behavior among consumers. I don't see any signs that that's going to increase over the coming year. About 50% of consumers indicate they plan on going to a farmer's market this summer. That's the exact same result that we saw at this time last year. So at this point, there's really no signs of growth in terms of the popularity of the farmer's market.
Is that right? Isn't that interesting? I'd be interested to know more about that as time goes along, because that's certainly an area where a lot of farmers are interested in this country. Certainly local has become a big deal. So interesting to follow and trace that. From your research, tell me a bit about the criteria that consumers use to make food purchases, because I know from our standpoint, and maybe this is just a historic thing, we always think that price is the main thing. What did you find?
We asked our respondents to tell us the 3 most important considerations they have when purchasing food, and the top 3 was freshness, price, and the consistency of the quality, so that being the quality of the food over repeat purchases.
So freshness and price, is that, again, a trend that has changed over the years as you've measured, or is it pretty consistent?
That's been pretty consistent,
Okay.
but what was interesting about these results compared to a similar survey last year was that there's actually been a slight bump up in the attention that's paid to price. And I think that's overall reflective of the economic conditions this time around versus where we were last year.
So it may
there's a
it may just be a short-term factor.
Absolutely.
Then. Okay. All right. Let me talk a little bit. We've mentioned a little bit about local here, and I want to spend a moment on this because I think it is a significant thing to talk about. I believe from your numbers it said 7% said that local is an important consideration, 1% mentioned organic. Your information, what does it reveal about how important the word local is, or the importance of buying local from a consumer perspective?
Absolutely. If we think about it, the whole buying local movement has really only started about 5 years ago. So now we see a 7% of consumers saying that it is the single most important criteria that they're looking for. But an additional 24%, which brings us up to about 30% overall, indicate that it's one of the 3 most important buying criteria.
Okay.
So that is pretty significant. In fact, when we look at the results, we find that it ranks right up there with taste and nutritional value of the food. So while buying local hasn't become the preeminent decision buying criteria, for a good number of consumers, it has moved into really the forefront of their buying decision.
And have you measured why that is in terms of, do people perceive the benefit of local to be economic, environmental?
There's a number of different benefits that consumers seem to derive from buying local, but first and foremost, it's the economic benefits. 90% of consumers talked about the overall importance of agriculture to the economy, and 85% indicated that it was about the feeling they got of supporting their local farmers.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
In addition to that, we do see some environmental benefits being derived in terms of less emissions, less use of fossil fuels, that they also makes them feel good, as well as the overall perception of quality of the food that they're buying.
Okay. And is there any evidence from the data? We keep asking this question, and I know that farmers across the country always want to know the answer. Is there any evidence that there is preferential bias given to local to the point that people will even pay more for local? Yes?
That really is the fundamental question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what we find time after time in these surveys is that 3/4 of consumers would be willing to buy a local product if it was clearly labeled as such and it was comparably priced with the alternatives. So we know that Ontarians, at least, do have a predisposition towards the Ontario-produced product. 40% of Ontario consumers would specifically be willing to pay a little bit more for that product that was produced in Ontario.
Interesting. And then, of course, farmers out there always know that what we say and what we do aren't always the same thing.
That's exactly
but
right.
It's an interesting indication nonetheless. Tell me, let's move over to perceptions for a little bit that you had in this study. First of all, we have seen comments in the media where the public in some cases views agriculture first and foremost as an environmental impact and secondarily as a source of food production. From an environmental standpoint, how is agriculture viewed in your study?
Well, the way we explored it in this survey, the perceptions are actually quite opposite to the case you just highlighted, Kevin. In fact, 90% of consumers felt that it was an overall positive impact on the local environment. Specifically, buying local helps reduce the amount of emissions from reduced transportation, and it reduces the dependence on fossil fuel. Overall, only about 45% of our consumers that we surveyed indicated that locally grown products were in fact a better value for them. Although about 2/3 indicated that they were better quality, that didn't necessarily translate into perceptions of better value at this point.
Gotcha. Well, listen, we'll leave it at that, and I appreciate your time speaking with us here today.
Thank you.
David Webb is the Associate Vice President of Ipsos Forward Research. If you are interested to know more about the Grow Our Farms campaign that we've just been discussing, you can visit them online at growourfarms.ca.